Hey, welcome to episode 262 of Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for pressing play. This episode, we're going to be talking with Joseph Wolf of Reaper Miniatures about their new tabletop RPG Dungeon Dwellers. That's right, not only are they well known for their extremely nice minis, but now they have a tabletop RPG, and it's sort of old school influenced, old school style, but using modern design. So we'll be talking with Joseph today about that. Other highlights include a little bit of ReaperCon chat. Joseph has some interesting RPG design highlights, including Forgotten Realms, Deadlands, and Blood of Heroes. Love it or hate it, 5e is very successful at what it does. Which Dungeon Dwellers came first, the minis or the RPG? Tolkien Orcs versus Warhammer Orcs. Super quick hot takes on the Rings of Power TV show. I freely admit to and don't apologize for being RPG system promiscuous. Innovation in RPG design is groovy, but you don't have to innovate. Just innovate. You don't have to innovate just to be cool. You'll hear all of that and more in today's episode. And also, I want to make sure to mention, if you didn't check out last episode, episode 261, that was an interview with George McDonald, who is the co-creator of the Champions superhero RPG, and also the co-founder of Hero Games. And my guest co-host on that episode was DM Mike Stewart himself of the Save for Half podcast. So make sure to check that out. With no further ado, let's get to today's episode. So away we go.
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky all up in your podcast. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for pressing play. As always, got a great episode. And this time, it's going to be a blend of two things that gamers love, tabletop gamers. One, minis, and two, role-playing games. So, and this is a kind of a cool product or a cool project, whatever, that kind of blends both together in a way that I haven't seen very often. So welcome to the show, Joseph Wolf of Reaper Miniatures. Joseph, welcome to Shane Plays Geek Talk.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. Glad to have you here. We met at the most recent North Texas RPGGeek, and we're going to be talking today, among other things, about Dungeon Dwellers. Which is, and I'm going to give you a chance to clarify on this, but it's both a tabletop role-playing game engine, RPG, if you will, and a line of minis from Reaper. But they can also kind of blend together, which is really cool. So I will definitely give you a chance to elaborate on that. Tell us real quick, what is your position, title, whatever at Reaper?
I'm Reaper's head writer and I guess line developer, designer, developer. I am Dungeon Dwellers author.
The author of Dungeon Dwellers. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to say that when I met you at North Texas RPGGeek, I really appreciated your energy. You're a very enthusiastic, friendly person. I ran Middle-earth role-playing, and it ended up getting quite a bit of interest. And you were like, dude, you just kind of like stopped me in the hallway. We're like, dude, that's so cool. You ran MERP, and you were talking about that. So I just really appreciated your outgoing, personality and friendliness. I mean, that's why most people go to cons, right? First and foremost, it's to play games that you love. Maybe you get to play new games you normally get to play, but it's also to meet people, right? You build up your con family. So I really appreciated that outgoing personality, which definitely helped you. I watched you demo Dungeon Dwellers more than once, and that energy, it was really good. You could tell you're like, hey, and you were excited about Dungeon Dwellers, and you wanted people to know about Dungeon Dwellers. And we also, I'm going to mention this briefly because none of this is official. None of this has even really been talked about yet. But there was a little bit of discussion, very informally, Okay. I don't want to get Joseph committed to something and the Reaper's like, what did you say?
Yeah, don't get me in trouble. Don't get me into trouble.
I'm not going to get you in trouble. There was very informal discussion with, I think, myself, Alan Groh. I think you were lurking around, and Michael Battalato, who's one of the main people from North Texas, that wouldn't it be cool during a North Texas RPGCon to maybe bring some people over for a tour of Reaper? And that was very informal. Nobody committed to anything, but I just want to say that I would love to see that happen. The next time I go to North Texas RPGCon, I sure wouldn't mind popping over to Reaper and seeing what's going on over there.
I suggest you make a phone call. And
yeah.
I am aware that such things do happen on a fairly regular basis, having been witness to them. So by all means, make a phone call.
Right.
And then just make arrangements. And from what I understand, it's kind of an informal show up, quick tour of the facility, answer questions, and have fun.
Yeah. So I'm going to follow up on that. I know people are like, oh yeah, that'd be really cool. But again, I want to make it real clear that you didn't officially or unofficially commit to anything. You were just kind of standing around while the discussion was going on. So
such things do happen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think they said back in the day, because North Texas RPGCon is, I think, entering its second decade now. And I think in one of the earlier ones, if I remember right, then Doug who has passed away now, Doug Ray, I think there was maybe at one of the earlier North Texas RPGCons, maybe there was somebody headed over to the Reaper. I'm not sure. But speaking of Reaper and people learning more about what Reaper does, you just had ReaperCon.
Yep.
Okay, so folks, we are going to be, the majority of this episode, we will be talking about Dungeon Dwellers, which is, and this is my term, I'll let Joseph describe it the way he does. I would say it is a sort of old school style dungeon crawl game, but it's a new set of rules. That's what I saw, but I'll let Joseph explain more of what it is. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about ReaperCon.
This is like my 10th anniversary ReaperCon of writing and running games for them. It's effectively my 11th year. So
let me jump in then. So you've been a Reaper friend of Reaper for a decade, but you just recently
much longer. Yeah.
Okay.
We started messing around with setting stuff, and we produced a number of other games. We produced Dark Heaven Legends Apocalypse. We produced a couple editions of Warlord, which is our own proprietary war game skirmish rule set, and it's very fun. But after all those years, we decided we wanted to do something more significant. And we had a lot of material written. I mean, it went into the can, it would go in cycles, and based upon what my other job allowed me to develop. And then we looked at the big pile, and we were like, we really should do something with all that. And as a result, Dungeon Dwellers kind of came out of that.
So in general, so Reaper does a lot, and that's one of the reasons that I like to do these podcasts on a variety of subjects, because I didn't even know Reaper had those product lines other than minis. So like if I go to ReaperCon, and here's the funny thing. My brother, who's not a gamer at all, happened to be in the Dallas area during ReaperCon, and he travels a lot for work, and he knows I'm a gamer. So he happened to stay at the hotel that ReaperCon was happening at, and he was calling me and like, man, there's all these gamers, and he was sending me pictures and everything, and then I know a couple of people, I think like Zach Glazer, and Michael Battalato were at ReaperCon, if I remember right. So they were, and Jennifer Glazer as well. So, and they were posting a lot about it. So what is it like? What is going to ReaperCon like? Is there anything different about it from another? Like North
interestingly,
Texas? I mean,
it's not really if you go to Origins or Gen Con, those are very much trade shows, right? They may have started off as something else, but they've changed a lot. So they're trade shows. And so it's, here's all our cool stuff. ReaperCon is still very much tied to its roots. And I think the first one was 2004, if I recall correctly. And it's a fan count. It's you like games, I like games, you like miniatures, I like miniatures. Let's get together for a couple days and like completely nerd out. And it hasn't changed a little bit, except for the fact that it's gotten bigger. I think we have 1,000 tickets that we can have per day. I think is kind of sort of where things are at.
That is pretty, yeah.
And we're not, and I don't think we're quite at capacity because we're still kind of rebuilding after the COVID shutdown. But we're getting there. I mean, our exhibitors hall is pretty full. We have room to move. We have room to not move. We have room to grow. We're at the Embassy Suites, which is a fantastic venue. I absolutely love the staff. They're super cool and very flexible.
Is that right in Dallas?
It's in Denton, I think.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not local, so I'm just like they just pick me up and drop me off, and I run games nonstop. Right. Then they put me on a plane again, and I fly home.
And off you go. So, but Reaper's actually Reaper's located in Denton, right?
Denton, yeah.
Denton, okay.
Which isn't far. It's like 40 minutes away or something like that. 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's the Metroplex area. I mean, it's one big urban sprawl.
But ReaperCon it's a great event because in the very short time that we've been running events, and God, Gen Con, we haven't been around for like 50 years. But we have grown. We have grown a lot, and as a result, we were able to add D&D encounters. We're an Adventurers League, rather. We're able to add Pathfinder Society. We have a lot of people running their own stuff. We have vendors. It's a con. It's a gaming con. Yeah, it's a gaming con.
It just happens to be put on by Now, does Reaper officially put it on, or is it just called ReaperCon?
Oh, it's Reaper puts it on.
So Reaper puts it on, but they don't.
Oh yeah.
Like you said, it's not a trade show. They don't restrict it to just Reaper products. They're like, come have fun, come game.
Warlord Games was there. There's a lot of companies that were there, and like I don't think we haven't had Ratham or Iron Crown there in a long time. Ratham, I think, shows up occasionally, but not in the last few years. But it's not restricted that way. It's just basically, hey, we're the hosts, so it's like, here's this cool event, come play with us. And that's how it's always been structured. Even when we were back we used to actually have it at the Reaper facility, the Reaper compound, and it was out of the warehouse. And I used to run. They'd tuck me away in the back. They'd move all the hardware, all the equipment out of the way, and then they would put me in like a little corner somewhere, and I'd run games all day. And it doesn't get more down and dirty than playing in the warehouse. And that's our start, right? I mean, we played upstairs, and then it just changed. It's like in 2012 they had me back, and I ran kind of a mix of Savage Worlds and Pathfinder in our setting, and it just took off. And the bosses were like, make sure he comes back every year. And then decades plus later, they hired me full-time as their full-time line developer after we convinced them to do Dungeon Dwellers roleplay. So
what did that feel like to go from being, I would say, that a super fan, a player, whatever, somebody who's a big customer, loves the Reaper experience. How did that feel to be brought on as an employee?
It's very humbling. We work with some very, very talented, creative people, the sculptors and the painters, and just the staff themselves. They're all very, very invested in the success of what we do, but their interests are all over the place. They're into like Pathfinder, they're into 5e, they're into GURPS, they're into all these different games, and so it's kind of cool to kind of sort of come into an environment where there's all these other nerds. And so coming in as an author, it was a little scary too, because all of a sudden it's like, I work remotely, so I don't have to go into work every day. I just get up, climb into my pajamas, and go downstairs and
you go to work every day. You just
I do go to work, but it's not like that. It's not like I have a commute and I have an office at Reaper HQ.
No, I'm with you. I've been a remote worker even before COVID started. So, you're still going to work. It's just a different. You just don't have a commute. So, and there's dangers on the flip side. Sometimes it's hard to, when you're at an office, you're like, it's closing time, and you go home and you're off work. When you work at home, sometimes it's hard to make that distinction, Yeah. So, but anyway,
last night, the wife wanted to go to bed, so I was like, okay, cool. Let me run downstairs and check on all the animals, make sure everything's cool. And I looked over at my computer, and I had this idea that I've been kind of mulling over. So I sat down, and half an hour burns by, and the wife had already gone to bed. So I'm like, oh crap. Right. And that happens a lot.
It's real. I do that all the time. I'd be like, let me just run upstairs and check on something. And then, so yeah, I've tried to get better about that, especially if we're like waiting to start a movie or something. And I'm like, oh, I just need to go check something. Or they're waiting on dinner. So ReaperCon, like, I love the fact that you mentioned that the people at Reaper play a lot of wide variety of games. Cause I am now, and I have always been, and I make no apologies for it. I am system promiscuous. I like to play different systems at different times. And if you try to lock me into just one game for the rest of my life, I would be miserable. So like with my weekly group, I run D&D for them. But anytime I get a chance to play another game, I will. And that's one of the reasons I like going to cons, is to play all this wide variety of, like, in just the past few years, I've become much more of a GURPS gamer. Been getting into Victor Raymond from the Tecumseh Foundation has been,
Nice.
getting me into Tecumseh. I'm fascinated with Tecumseh.
Rock on, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I just like you said, I was running Middle Earth role playing at North Texas RPGGeek. So I like to get exposed to a lot of different stuff. So and I like to see how the systems work. So I was one of the kids, like when I was a kid, I would buy a role playing game thinking I'll probably never get to run this with anybody, right? But I want to see how the rules work, and I want to see all the, so I'm really into that. I like to see how different systems work.
Same.
So at ReaperCon, like what kind of, it sounds like it's a pretty good spread of games, but is it more old school, or is there like a lot of new stuff being run?
It was us, 5e, and Pathfinder Second Ed. In terms of Dungeon Dwellers, we were at North Texas RPGCon because we really wanted the audience to see the old school in what we're doing. But we are very much new school in terms of our love of consistency. We don't like a lot of if-then rules. We want a tight little system where even if you don't know the specific ruling, you can guess based upon how everything else in the system works. So there isn't a lot of consulting of the rule book. Like if you watch me run a game, you don't see me checking the rule book unless I'm looking up a spell description. And even then, that's rare. So that's one of the goals.
So it's like intuitive based.
Yep.
It's intuitive on what should happen based on what you've already seen.
Exactly. You know how ability scores are put together. You know how proficiencies are put together. You know how saving throws work. That's like 85% of the game. And so if you know that, roll a d20, high roll's good, low roll's not good. Add the modifiers, what you got. And that's how it works. And that's really what we wanted. When we first sat down and started talking about it, we were like, we want this to be familiar. We want any person of any edition of D&D, any edition, will know 80 to 85% of this game without even cracking it open. And when you get to that 15%, though, and this is important, it's all in the flavoring, right? It's all in that last 15% secret sauce, which makes our game stand out a little bit. And that's really where the designer in me really gets to really flex some muscle, come up with some new ways to do stuff.
Let's dig into that a little bit. I did want to say on ReaperCon, if I understand correctly, it's always Labor Day weekend. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so folks, if you want to go check out what sounds like another great convention in the North Texas area, go check out ReaperCon. So
love to play with you. Come play with us.
Come play with Reaper. So and like again, I love the fact that Reaper puts on a fan con, that they don't try to make it a stealth. Hey, we're going to market Reaper to you. I mean, I'm sure they don't mind if people come and buy Reaper stuff, but
we love that.
Yeah. It sounds like they're supporting the gaming community in general. I think that's fantastic. So,
yeah.
I want to talk, you were talking about the designer in you and all that. We've talked a little bit about Dungeon Dwellers as a old school feel game, but with sensibilities, that are maybe not old school as far as the design, but the feel would be old school. But before you mentioned your designer and you, so what background did you come from, like writing or designing or whatever, before you became the author on dungeon
I
dwellers.
went to school for biology, but I quickly discovered unless you're
Yeah.
in the top 6% of your trade, of your field, you're not going to do anything. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a tree with a frog in one hand, thermometer in the other, and it's going to be a miserable, solitary existence. So I abandoned that after my first attempt at graduation, and I just floated around. I did all kinds of different jobs. I worked warehouses. I did all kinds of stuff. And I fell in with the writing crowd because I was running games all the time. And it just kind of sort of blossomed. And then I made some friends at TSR at Gen Con Indy. This is back when, this was actually Milwaukee still. And they gave me, very generously gave me a leg up. And they gave me a couple modest projects. And did fairly well, relatively speaking. I wrote Skullport for AD&D Second Edition for the Forgotten Realms, and I got to play in the sandbox that Ed Greenwood and Stephen Shend created, and it was very humbling to do that. Made a lot of mistakes, a lot of epically bad mistakes, and then my real kind of step up was with Deadlands. I was working with Shane Hensley and the crew as just a freelancer, just some guy who, I've got these ideas. It would be kind of cool if I saw them in print. And then they very kindly gave me opportunities, and I got to write the Boomtowns. I got to write about dinosaurs in the Old West, and so. But flash forward many years later, I called Reaper out of the blue when I was working at a hobby shop of all places, and I established a rapport and made friends with Ron, who is my publisher, editor, and my eternal bromance. And he's the creative director at Reaper Miniatures, and he's my audience. He's the guy I always write for. It's like, if he thinks it's cool, I think I'm on the right track. He's my litmus test. And so that just kind of sort of, it went from there. But yeah, I like many people in the industry, I came from something completely not English. I didn't come from journalism. I know how to string a couple words together, apparently. I always tell people when I write, it looks like a T-Rex with boxing gloves, hammering away on the keyboard. And that's me, right? I'm just this big guy hunched over the keyboard, beating away. And I throw words on the page until they stick, until they look right to my eye. And then thankfully I have very talented editors that fix my many, 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 many glaring mistakes. So yeah, that's basically it. I mean, I was all over the place, dude.
So I'm looking here, and I see in addition to Skullport, with TSR for the Forgotten Realms, looks like you did some work with. You mentioned Deadlands, but I see some Blood of Heroes work here. So tell us about that. That's interesting to me because I'm a big DC Heroes fan.
Yeah, DC.
Right. I love the Megs system. I think it's a very cool system for superhero games. It's almost like everybody says it now, but I'll say it anyway. If you're going to do a superhero game, you have to have a system that can have Superman and Batman in the same encounter. And Megs did that really well. So, and then I also see that you worked some with Legends of the Five Rings here. So,
yeah, I did. That was really minor, though. I just set some monster stats and I also rewrote the armor system so that it did what I wanted it to. But yeah,
still pretty. That's a pretty good. That's a pretty good variety of game systems to have worked on, and I mean, I've heard of all of them, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Blood of Heroes was a lot of fun, but it was rough. I rewrote the NPCs. I rewrote like the entire NPC section, which was like 111, 116 NPCs, and that was way more work than I signed up to do. Let me tell you, that was a very foolish thing on my part. But it was cool that we were able to do it, and it's a great game.
Well, in the rear view mirror, you can say at least you got a credit out of it, right? So
that's pretty much all I got for it.
Yeah, it's experience and credit. So and I see here that you've done some work with Castles of Crusades.
Initially, what we were doing is I was running Castles and Crusades because it scratched the itch of a D&D game, but it didn't have all of the I would hate to use the word blemish, But the fact of the matter is I'm not a big fan of inconsistencies. I hate having to tell people, roll low for this, roll high for this, roll a d6 to find a secret door, roll percentages to do this. Nothing's wrong with any of that. I mean, that's all old school. My shelves are full of that. But teaching people those rules it's archaic, and I don't love that. Having teach people that, but Castle and Crusades is dealt very nicely with what's the siege engine does a lot of things really well, and it pushed the game forward, and it was well supported, and the guys at Troll Lord Games are phenomenal and super cool. And so we initially thought it would be kind of cool to support that, and so. Like the Vanishing Blackguard was Castles and Crusades, and for a number of years I ran Castles and Crusades at ReaperCons. But what we found is that if I advertised 5e, every seat was full, and Castles and Crusades was like 50% full, and so we struggled to fill our tables.
Right, I can see that. So first of all, if we're going to talk about Castles and Crusades, like those Troll Lords is my neighbors. Like I've been to their offices, if you will. I know Stephen and like Todd, and now I haven't met Davis personally. I have a pretty good relationship with Stephen and Todd, and they've been out there doing it. They run a very smart business. In fact, I had Stephen on not that long ago talking about practices he did in his personal business that helped him weather the COVID storm, because he wasn't doing anything out of China. He was doing it all locally, just based on business principles he'd already put in place. But the point is, what I really want to say is I always like to give Castles of Crusades and Troll Lords a shout out, because they were one of the first to jump on the OGL and do something with it and get out there before it was a proven thing
and do something relatively new. I mean, if you looked at the earliest C and K, or if you looked at the earliest version of the rules that they produced, and they've done a lot of editions. They've done like 9 printings of that game, and they're all different. So, in my opinion, those are all editions. But that's neither here nor there. But the thing is that they had the knight. That was a player character option, right? And they put the assassin back in. Good or for bad, I don't know. It varies in opinions. But the thing is,
I like having an assassin. I don't have any problem with
the thief stuff, the rogue is an assassin. He has a backstab ability. You don't need an assassin. But the thing is that they did great things, and they did inspiring things. They have aired. They have their own setting.
Going strong.
They are, and they just produced like a mega edition of the Monsters and Treasures book. And they're just doing great stuff.
They're doing the Starship, and I know we're not here to talk about Castles and Crusades.
But it's cool. But it's inspirational, right? It's inspirational.
I want to give them a shout out. And,
totally.
They also, not only did they get out there, almost one of the first to run out there on the OGL and really jump in, and before it had even really been legally proven what could all be done yet, and built a business off of it. They also, like you were talking about, the siege engine. It's an attribute based check. Like if you want to do something strength related, use your strength. If you want, and that was way ahead of its time.
Yep.
That was way ahead of its time. So
it was mechanically satisfying, and it also was kind of elegant. And I ran it for a long time. But it was foundational to. It taught me a lot about what I wanted to do.
And talk about 5e. I've got it. I mean, I like older games. I like different game systems, and I like different stuff. I'd probably be happy playing OSR games the rest of my life if I had to. But 5e has been a huge hit, and I have to give nothing but credit to Wizards of the Coast for the success of 5e. I mean, it wasn't just them. There were a lot of different factors that came together to help the rise of 5e, but it didn't hurt at all that they put out a really good system. I mean, 5e plays well, you can quibble over mechanics and this and that, but it plays well. So when you have the people that are just seeing D&D in pop culture all of a sudden again over the past few years, or they watch Critical Role or whatever, or, and then they try it out, they're not scared off by the rules, right?
Yeah.
I mean, D&D plays pretty well. The 5e does. I have to give it to them. So
it's certainly ubiquitous, and Wizards of the Coast was they leveraged good design and attractive. I mean, it looks nice, right?
Right.
And they leveraged the event, right? They leveraged COVID. Like, we were all hanging home and we were on Zoom, and so all of a sudden people wanted a tabletop, and it brought a lot of people to the game, and which is great. 5e is like 4e in the respect that it met all of its design goals. Like, they had very specific design goals. You can see them in the design, and then they met those goals. And but it's an ever changing thing, So D&D 1, which is coming, is going to be reflective of, again, those changes, the changing climate. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Personally, 5e is a great example of lots of great mechanics that can be borrowed and then applied to an OSR inspired rule set to make DDRPG. And that's what we did. We borrowed the short rest and the long rest because it puts characters back into play, right? You don't have to spend 3 months recuperating.
Right.
You're not playing Rollmaster where sitting 6 months out while your character's arm heals. That's not fun.
Right.
Going back into the dungeon is fun. The power level of it is significantly ramped up from previous editions, which is very attractive to modern players who don't want to grind. But no, it's great. I'm not one of those persons that bashes on 5e too loudly. I mean, there's parts of it that drive me nuts, but
you can quibble with anything, but it's 5e has been a very well received edition of whether you can't quibble that D&D is the most well known, most played tabletop RPG out there.
People refer to role playing games as D&D. So you're playing with D&D with your friends this weekend, and you're like, well, no, we're playing Middle Earth role play. But your mom thinks of it as it became Coke.
D&D. Well,
it's Coke.
That's what I said. Like in the South, I know you're in Michigan. So you want a Coke? Yeah. What kind of Coke do you want?
What flavor?
I'll take a Pepsi. Yeah, I'll take a Pepsi.
There you go. Yep.
So Coke is shorthand for any soda pop, any soda.
Yep. And D&D kind of become the same, right? And which is kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, they just own they just own the space. I mean, with the non-gamer, they own the space. Now, once you get into gaming, you have a wedge of the pie that doesn't play D&D and loves all kinds of other games. But on the outside looking in, it's all D&D to the average person. So, all right. So anyway, let's talk about, since you brought up some of the mechanics and whatnot, I want to clarify a little bit here on Dungeon Dwellers. So what came first, the Dungeon Dwellers minis or the Dungeon Dwellers RPG, or were they simultaneous?
The miniatures for sure. Ron wanted to create a fork, and you want to get him on because he can talk about it more authoritatively than I possibly can. But what he basically said was he wanted to create a line of minis that had that old school feel, whereas Orcs had kind of become Games Workshop Orcs, not deliberately, but that's kind of where it headed. He wanted to bring them back to Tolkien style Orcs, really ugly humanoids, right? And same thing with a lot of the other figures. Less World of Warcraft, more old school D&D. And so the armor looks like real armor. Proportions are a little more realistic, although that's debatable. But the thing is that it was all about, reestablishing that connection. And Reaper owned the Dungeon Dwellers line from Old Heritage. So they were able to produce this beautiful range of miniatures. And so it set us on the path to doing the RPG.
So the lineage is the same Dungeon Dwellers that wasn't Reaper at one point, and then Reaper got the line?
Yeah, okay. Reaper acquired the Heritage line, and they're the ones that produced the original Dungeon Dwellers, And it's a neat little ancestry to see it all kind of evolve. And now we've got Dungeon Dwellers paint sets, and then the RPG kind of evolved out of our love of what those miniatures meant, And if you compare, orcs to the warlord line, they're as different as night and day. And
Well,
so there's kind of
I like
separate continuums.
I like orcs as the ugly humanoid and not the big bulky. I mean, the bulky's fine, but I like a Tolkien orc if I'm going to talk about.
It's fun because it depends upon the game. Like if I'm running Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which I love, I reach for those cool bull orcs, right? And the soccer hooligan orc. But when I want to run like against the Dark Master, which is a Middle Earth retro clone, or if I want to run my game, DDRPG, I like my players to have the Angus McBride orcs from the old Angus McBride paintings from the old Middle Earth product line. And that's always going to be the orcs.
As long as we're talking about ugly orcs and humanoids, have you seen any of the new Rings of Power show?
Yes, I have.
And I'm not going to get in because I know people have a huge.
Dude, that's another whole conversation.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into all that because people have different opinions on Rings of Power. All I'm going to say is whether people like Rings of Power or not, the first orc they finally show you is a horror show. That was almost like, it was almost like
those are Morgoth's first orcs. But here's what I say about Rings of Power, because there are Tolkien purists and there's different kinds of Tolkien purists. Right? Are there 5 wizards? Are there more than that? Blah blah blah. Are there pigeons in Middle Earth? Tolkien never talked about them, so they can't exist. So the thing is, here's the deal with the Rings of Power. It's a spectacle. It's as good as television Tolkien is ever going to be. So just sit back and enjoy the ride. That's what I tell all my friends. Just enjoy it.
My take on it is it's really, really pretty, well-produced fan fiction, and I'm enjoying it on that level. And
there you go.
And it's beautiful. I could put my quibbling hat on and pull out.
Don't. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
I'm not sure. Actually, I think I've told some, and people have different opinions. I'm going to have a show on Rings of Power because
that'll be
people
awesome.
are very passionate about. People are really passionate on many parts of the spectrum about the show. Here's my thing on it, and I think if I was 20 or 30, this may not be my take on it, but as an old grognard who's been around been around a little while. If I can't be with the one I love, I'll love the one I'm with. And I'm enjoying the show. I'm enjoying the show on that level.
And that's how every fan should go into it. Just appreciate what we're given.
It's beautiful. The production values.
Well, the thing is that, and going back to Tolkien, is that, I'm heavily influenced by Tolkien, and Ron and I frequently talk about, what we want to do. And we have a Middle Earth sensibility. We love the scope. We love the scale, right? We love the history. We want to go back 10,000 years and talk about that stuff. But we also are grounded in like the slick forgotten realms as well. So it's always an interesting dynamic. Me too. It's a dynamic pull. Neither of them has to win, but the dynamic pull between the two of them, makes for some pretty cool content.
It does. And I mean, there's some games where I just want a quick little romp through the Forgotten Realms. Yeah. But there might be other times where I want to do a real deep, dive into something Tolkien-ish. So, but anyway, so let's talk back to DDRPG, Dungeon Dwellers RPG. So there's a line of miniatures that Reaper produces called Dungeon Dwellers. Yep. But there's also a role-playing game called Dungeon Dwellers RPG,
which is presently in its version 2 beta. We actually released physical copies of it. I actually have copies of it right here.
Oh, cool, man!
And 64 pages. But this, you don't have this yet. This the one we were giving away. No, the one we were giving out was half this thick, and it was only character creation and some basics. No, this is a self-contained, ready to play. Player's guide, GM, monster book. So it's all in here. And this is but again, it's our V2 beta. So this is not the, ready for prime time yet, but we are distributing this. It will be available for download for free online eventually. Fairly soon.
If somebody wants a hard copy, can they pay for one, or how does that work?
Then they'll just take the PDF to Kinko's and get them printed.
I got you. Okay,
here's the thing. But the long-term goal is something much. the offering that we're going to have available probably in the spring will be significantly different and much more profound, I guess is probably the smartest way to say it, is the plan.
Well, I will link. People can go on the show notes at shaneplays.com or go to Reaper, the Reaper website. Go to Reaper.
We have a banner so you can easily find all the role plays, including lots of adventures, the V1 rules. I will apply a little pressure to get the V2 stuff up as soon as possible because there's a lot of people asking for it.
Cool. So, people go to Reaper Mini, not Reaper Minis, reapermini.com /RPG, or just go to reapermini.com and there'll be links to take you to
there's a banner, and we have like 5 or 6 downloadable adventures and a bunch of other stuff. So
there's
a lot of stuff to download.
For free, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's,
and there's more in the can you guys haven't even seen yet. So we're lots more coming. People can also go to shaneplays.com, go to the show notes for today's episode, and there'll be links, including reapermini.com /RPG. So right now, there's the version 1 available for download, which is character creation only.
Right. So you're saying hopefully soon that V2 beta will be available for download on the site.
Absolutely.
Now,
absolutely.
and you say that's a more complete like player and GM's guide?
It is, and a monster manual. It's literally broken up into basically 3 large sections. It's character creation, which is it's cleaned up, refined content from the V1 rules, and then there's a GM section which talks about rewards and leveling and all the stuff that you need to be a GM. Also hazards, but everything is very brief and very, very tight. And then there's also a robust bestiary. Characters right now are on levels 1 through 3 because we want to, by controlling the levels. That's a good intro. It's a little easier to balance things, right? When we're designing, but we are not going to probably ship with levels 1 through 3. We're still discussing what we want to do in the long term. Of course, characters. My goal personally, I want characters to be playable beyond level 20, which is something 5e can't say.
That's true.
At level 20, you hit the cap. What do you do now? You retire and build another character. I would like our system to, and it's a goal. It's a very lofty goal to be playable beyond level 20.
So, what? I have a couple of questions here. I'm going to throw them out there, and then I'll try to, because they're kind of different from each other. One is, when I look in the back of the PDF, there is an OGL there for Wizards. So I was going to ask what edition are you drawing on? And it sounds like 5e is some of what you're drawing on mechanically for DDRPG. And the second question is, what is the ultimate goal for DDRPG for Reaper? Like, why all this effort is? I mean, I doubt it's just to give away free PDFs into perpetuity. So I know those are distinctly different questions. So let's start with the first one. Like, what is it all 5e mechanics?
No.
Okay. So what is the OGL?
So
I know you mentioned long rest and short rest.
Think about it as Legos. Yep. Right. Okay. So if you have like a hero and a GURPS background, you're used to different quantities of Legos, right? Hero gives you a big box of 1 million little parts, and you can build whatever you want, but it's very complicated and very fussy. I love Hero. Don't get me wrong. GURPS, the pieces are bigger. The chunks of Lego, it's more like a model kit. You can build a couple different things with it, but there's still, the modularity isn't quite as granular. So DDRPG is built with the idea that basically I'm going to give you a bunch of Lego parts, and you can snap them together like little modules however you want to build the game and stuff that you want. Now, initially, the offering in terms of the Lego pieces we're going to give you guys is going to be minimal. We're giving you 4 folk, which is our version of ancestries, lineages, races, whatever. And then we also have 4 classes. And they're the most common, most interested. These are the ones that people always want to play until you introduce some more crazy stuff. They're the most common, right.
Exactly.
But again, by restricting what we're offering initially, it makes it easier for us to balance later. Releasing 30 classes and races right off the bat is a disaster. I can't even imagine trying to balance that out. But we want a consistent, fun, playable experience. We don't want players being really sad about the Beastmaster Ranger 10 years down the road. So that's where it's coming from. We come from in actuality, the math is 3x in Pathfinder. That's where the math mostly comes from. But we're bolting on very elegantly the pieces of 5th ed that are beautiful. Short rests and long rests. Their magic system, I think their magic system is a huge leap forward in terms of how slots and how you can upscale. But I don't think they went far enough with it. I think there's more exploration to be done with that magic system. And there's a lot of little.
You're talking about 5e's magic
5e,
system?
Yep. 5e's magic. The slot, being able to cast a spell at a higher slot was a very elegant mechanic, allowing players to prepare like a bucket and just throw the spells into the bucket. And these are the ones I can cast as often as I want today. That's a very elegant mechanic, and it doesn't get fussy with spell points or anything complex like that. It's a nice intermediate between a spell point system, which can be a little complicated, and the slot system of the earlier editions of D&D. Wizards feel robust. They feel fairly powerful. And I think that's some great design. I think that they did some great stuff. And so that's, for now, in the V2 rules, we're using pretty much the spell descriptions out of 5th ed, but we rewrote all the spells to be a lot simpler so that they're not as wordy. And also, I got rid of all the references to advantage. We do not support advantage by name because, we could have a conversation about this that would take the entire session. But basically, it comes down to, mechanically, it's a bit of a win button, and disadvantage is a lose button. And it's not a mechanic that I love. It feels very awkward. Some people love it, and that's great. I support them, but it's not something that I love. Even though we do have some advantage-like mechanics worked in there here and there. As far as the second question goes, is world domination too much of a reach, I guess, in terms of our ultimate goal?
Why is Reaper doing this?
Why are we doing this? Okay.
Yeah.
We are nerds too. And wouldn't it be nice to produce content that belongs to us? If we produce 5e material, it gets lost in the vast ocean. And if we write OSR exclusively, right, it gets lost in the vast ocean. But the thing we use around the shop is the bridge product. We believe that, new editions tend to fracture the community, and not everyone's super happy with the direction of whatever game, 5th ed or Pathfinder 2 or whatever. Many are, which is great. But the thing is that what if we created a bridge product that the ultimate goal of it is to borrow the best elements from all of these, and then just kind of wed those elements together to make a game that appeals to me. And that's the real thing, is Reaper will own Dungeon Dwellers. We wouldn't really, you would own something with a 5th edition logo on it, but it gets lost. And so Dungeon Dwellers will be ours. So heavily inspired by earlier editions, but with the elegance of the later editions and the consistency as well. And that's really the goal, is that we wanted a game we could call our own. And this is a great way to do it.
So for the time being, you're going to put out beta testing materials. If people go to the reapermini.com/RPG, just go to reapermini.com, you'll find it, or again, you can go to the show notes at shaneplays.com for a link.
To be honest, I'm hoping we can get a beta 2.1 up, to be honest, because there's always things that I want to just kind of smooth, and not radically, but just we find errors. And that's what we want to do, is ultimately we want people to play it, try it out, and then get back to me. You can go to our Discord server. There's a DDRPG Discord server for Reaper Miniatures. There's a very active forum for Reaper Miniatures that we even have our own little section. DDRPG.
I saw that, right on the reapermini.com website.
Friend me on Facebook. You can't miss me, and send me, let's have a conversation. Ultimately, DDRPG is for everybody. It's for all of us to enjoy. It's not mine. It's ours, and that's what we really want. It's like our fan convention. We want it to be for everybody, And if you're not happy with 600, 900 pages of rules, and if you're not happy with this other flavor of 900 pages of rules, and you want something that feels like an OSR game but plays modern. I think that's where DDRPG really finds its niche.
Well,
and the fact that we're wedded to a wonderful line of miniatures.
Well, that's
really
another thing I was going to
gives us a
ask.
leg up.
So it's not, it doesn't sound like it's a cynical ploy to say, hey, here's a free first through third level RPG. And oh, by the way, on the back, there's all these minis you should buy to play with it. I mean, I mean, obviously that there's, I guess there'd be suggested minis for certain adventures and stuff like that. But
all of our adventures list the minis you
right.
need. And we're working on a system where you can literally go to the website, download the adventure, and then click a box, and it fills your shopping cart with the miniatures you need for that adventure.
Right, but I want to phrase it better, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, hey, if you're going to run this adventure, these minis specifically work perfectly with this adventure.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yep.
But this isn't we're going to put out a one-time free PDF for first through. I mean, you're doing a whole role-playing game line or a role-playing game that even if people never buy the minis, there's a robust role-playing game experience here.
Yeah. You can literally play what we've given you so far, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. They wouldn't have hired a full-time writer if they didn't have bigger plans, right? So we have a very robust campaign setting. We have little chunks that are also very thick. I already turned in a bunch of support material for that setting. We have a gigantic Bible for the region I'm currently working on. So there's a ton of stuff that is going to be put out. So it's not just going to be a one and done. I mean, I would never sign up for that because, quite frankly, I want to be your guys' tour guide. I want to write the tour guides.
I guess to put it very clearly, it's not a cheap marketing ploy. I mean, this is a full-on role-playing experience. So like when I think Dungeon Dwellers, I think, oh, I'm going to be dungeon crawling. But when you say you have a full-on campaign coming, like what is it going to support? Overland, wilderness, in the dungeon?
Absolutely.
Okay, so is the
well, it wouldn't. It's in my opinion, we're giving you basic.
Yeah.
And then it'd be cool if a little bit later on down the road we give you expert, which adds all the overland stuff. It's already implied there, but the classic hex crawl, it's not in the V2 rules, but it's on my mind. I love wilderness adventures. I'm not such a big fan of the extra planar stuff, but it will be part of it. I mean, the thing is that our world is not as connected as the Forgotten Realms. So it's extra planar stuff isn't going to be as big a factor. I think there's plenty of great adventures that can be done underground and above ground.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm totally fine with a good old fashioned kick in the door dungeon crawl personally, but everybody's looking for different experiences. So the campaign setting, or not the campaign setting, but the setting for the game that you're developing, is it grimdark? Is it high fantasy? How would you describe it?
You know, it's funny. It's not any one thing. I think it depends heavily upon the emphasis the game master wants to put on it. It is not by default grimdark, but we have a nation ruled by vampires. But it's not Sylvania from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It's kind of a Vampire the Masquerade approach. You know, it's underground. But we also have the city of Barrowgate, which we featured on a very large map at the convention. And Barrowgate is built on the doorstep to the West Barrow Hills. And the West Barrow Hills have been used as a cemetery by all the peoples for thousands of years. And it is a horrific, cancerous kind of a place where all kinds of bad stuff comes.
When you say Barrow, I'm getting excited. So yeah,
Barrowgate, right?
So.
But it's called Barrowgate because it incorporated these elven weird stones, which it surrounded this massive area, this 80 odd leagues in one way and 40 odd leagues that way. this area where people have been buried for thousands of years. And so there's a ton of bad stuff just churning there. It's a cancerous area. And so it's not the chaos wastes, but it's a little more subtle than that. But Barrowgate's built on its threshold, and Barrowgate is an adventurer-friendly refuge. So they sell potions, they sell wands, they sell 10. So it's like whatever you want, you just go to Barrowgate.
Well, I love the idea too of, I'm going to go into the Barrows in a venture, but I can run back to Barrowgate, lick my wounds, go to the tavern, get
before
potions.
the sunset.
Yeah.
Yep,
And,
exactly. You run back, and you're like, and you go to, and the thing is that we have a Green Griffin tavern little booklet you can download for free, and that's our definitive adventurer's tavern. Right. That's our yawning portal. If you're familiar with it. Oh
yeah, definitely.
And it's downloadable for free right now. You can download that.
So, what about the rest of the setting? Is it? I mean, like, are elves like high elves living in mystical cities? Are dwarves delving into the mountain, or do you have a different take on things, or what's going on there?
We wanted this to be as familiar. We love innovation, but we wanted this to be as familiar as possible. So what we want to do is we want to just take. It's like you find a gemstone in the earth. You shape it, and then you polish it, and that's what we want to do. Is we want to take all those great core ideas, wood elves, gray elves, whatever, and we want to have all of those in our world. And we want to just polish them up. We don't need aquatic elves, aquatic dwarves with gills and a tail to make our game stand out. And if you want to do that stuff, great. Run with it. Make your own
I'm cool
world.
with that, because there is something to be said for refreshing things. Like, well, let's do a different take. But sometimes I just want. I want to adventure in a fantasy setting that is what some people would think of as the default fantasy.
There has to be some degree of predictability in the fantasy setting. Otherwise, you have no context for anything. Tecumel is a great example. You talked about Tecumel earlier, and I love Empire of the Petal Throne. And the Tecumel Foundation is doing great things with their books. In fact, I bought a bunch of the books at North Texas. But it's completely alien. You have to, and it's really, players struggle. Players have to be as familiar with the content as the game master to make any sense of it. Otherwise, they're just like, what is going on here? So you asked about our elves. We have dwarf. In most settings, elves are in decline, or they're fleeing across the ocean. Tolkien did that. Our elven nations are robust, healthy. They're just like every other nation. They're to some extent struggling to deal with massive changes. But the thing is that our elven nations, with one exception, are very healthy. We have an elven nation of wood elves. We have an elven nation of gray elves, and we also have cool little elven fastnesses all over the map. Same with dwarves. Dwarves are all over the place. They're not in decline, and so the races are healthy. Unfortunately, that also means like. The orcs are healthy. So like the orcs are able to, the orcs are also teeming, right? So when the orcs invaded and pushed a lot of it sounds like
there's plenty.
It's everything's kind of sort of in transition is what it comes down to. Everything's alive and thriving, but it's on the head of a pin.
So there are multiple opportunities for adventure with a variety of familiar races and milieus, but then I just want to say milieu, and then.
Milieu is a fun word.
And then you also have kingdoms run by vampires. So it's a nice mix of stuff. Yeah. So
it's familiar enough. It's familiar enough is what it comes down to.
And that's cool because, like I said, I don't mind trying a new dish at a restaurant. In fact, sometimes you discover wonderful things that way you would never have discovered before. The first time I had Indian food, I really didn't like it. But now Indian food is absolutely one of my favorite kinds of food. But sometimes I just want to go get,
there's virtue in a cheeseburger. Right.
I mean, and not even
there's virtue in a cheeseburger.
It's not even a cheeseburger. It's like a good old Southern meal or, just something familiar. So I like both. But it's,
That's DDRPG, and we are the delicious juicy cheeseburger or plate of lasagna. If you love the plate of lasagna,
and there's nothing wrong with that. See, there's a
No.
I think there's a feeling among certain segment of the designers out there that you have to innovate or be fresh just to innovate and be fresh. And no, you don't have to. You don't have to. You can just tell me a good story. Give me a good adventure to play in, So
our fans like elves and dragons and dwarfs. And so that's what we really want to get.
I don't mind playing around with other stuff at all, but that's always going to be my first love when it comes to fantasy role playing. Right. So,
Me too.
So I got to start drawing us to a close here. What would you say is, other than the feel of it, like the setting and the races and this and that, what would be old school about DDRPG, about Dungeon Dwellers RPG? What do you feel makes it sort of old school?
The power level of it is lower. Pathfinder, Second Ed, and Fifth Ed were built to be super heroic fantasy.
Yeah.
If Marvel was to make a fantasy role playing game, it would be those two, and those are great games. They are wonderful games. But if you don't want superhero, if you want a gritty Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, if you want a gritty Elric kind of a story, Dungeon Dwellers does that well, because a lot of things just aren't there.
I joke with the older, and I grew up on, you can get one-shotted in your very first encounter and you better start rolling up a new character. So I always joke around, it's like, I like games where it's like, don't even bother to name your character till third level. Not that I ever did that. It's, just kind of joking around, like, don't get too attached until this character has made it through a couple of scrapes. But I like that. Like I run my group through 5e, but in between campaigns, we'll play other stuff. Like, I took them through Keep on the Borderlands NBX, and then I took them through some 1E stuff. I think I took them through Ravenloft in 1E. And the difference of play style is tremendous, because they learned, oh, you mean my role in the party is really important. And, oh, tactics in the fight is really important. I can't just roll in
it's okay to run away.
It's okay to run
and recuperate.
And re-arc means
the thing is, one of the biggest changes between new school and old school is new school. The idea of it is I'm going to just keep throwing resources against it and eventually we'll win. And old school goes, no, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, you don't.
and so it's. Modern players are used to save points in video games. They kind of expect the same thing. And 5e is, to some extent, it has those mechanics in place, because that's the goal. But the thing is, that's where Dungeon Dwellers is like, and we have one death save. I don't give you 3. I give you 1. And if you get clobbered for 15, 20 points of damage, that's the DC to save versus.
And see, I like that, because
if you fail it, dead.
I like you're not trying to be everything to everybody, because there's a certain segment of the tabletop gamers that want this kind of game. I want this kind of game. I like this kind of game. Like I like that if my character makes it to higher levels, holy smokes, that's a big deal that character is like 6th level, right? I mean, that's an accomplishment. We used to, and I know all about this as the design, as a designer and all that, but used to, it's different now. Everybody in 5e every character comes out the gate at a fairly high power level. But used to, fighters came out fairly strong, but then they topped off early, where a wizard started off very weak, but then that power curve went up and up and up the longer they survived.
Same deal with monks.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. And I personally like that. It doesn't bother me a bit, So it's like,
it's my hope that because of the way that all the classes are structured, it's my hope that all of them feel nice and good throughout their careers. Right. That's one of the design goals.
Which is always a great design goal. You want every character to be fun to play. I guess what I'm saying is, despite what I think the current school of thought is in role-playing game design, there are many players, including myself, who even like it a little bit more if it's harder, or if it's, I don't even know if harder is the right word, if it's a lower power level. where you have to be more cautious.
Mhm.
You have to think a little bit more.
There's more at stake at all levels in old school games. There's way more at stake because you can't just play lazy. You can't just kind of like lurk in the shadows and shoot your bow. Like one of the big differences in like how we do our experiences, I don't give you experience points for monsters.
Oh, interesting.
Every challenge, the game master looks at it and goes, is it a level 1? Is it like a super easy challenge or super hard? And that gives you the experience points for that encounter.
Oh,
and every challenge, every encounter is potentially worth experience points. And I have it structured so that at about every 10 significant encounters, challenging
You're going to level up.
Encounters, you level up. But you can't just grind through 10,000 kobolds to go up a level because you just
because
get it.
Well, I know games aren't the real world, but in the real world, the more kobolds you kill, the less they teach you. After you've killed 1,000 of them, you're not really learning much anymore.
And what is challenging for one group may be a walk in the park for another. So the game master literally adjusts on the fly the value of those experience points. And they're like, well, you guys took care of the monster in 2 rounds because you guys were like Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. Another group will struggle. Well, guess what? More experience points or less experience if the game master feels it's appropriate.
Interesting.
And that it's not tied to monsters. And that's one of the biggest. One of the biggest differences. Is it's performance.
All right. So last question. I'm at a con. I walk up and. At a con, you have all these different opportunities. I can play this game, I can play that game, or I can go over and look at the vendor table, or I can go, whatever. I run into you at a con because you're running demos. What is it that you say to me to say, out of all the stuff I could do for the next couple hours, what is the compelling sell, if you will, for me playing Dungeon Dwellers RPG? What is it about it that I want to spend my time playing when I have a lot of other games around?
The elevator pitch, that's fun. Yeah. Basically, here's the long and the short of it. I'm going to give you a familiar experience with important decisions where your actions matter. The system is going to reward you for heroic play. You're going to feel like a badass. You're going to feel terrified in the next minute. It's going to be a fun, thrilling, very unpredictable experience. Because for example, we have you reroll initiative every round. So the cycles that you're used to in other RPGs, the predictability in other RPGs is thrown right out the window.
I've played a couple other games that have that mechanic, and I like it a lot because if you have a multi-round combat that goes past 3 or 4 rounds and the initiative's the same, it takes some of the dynamic.
Going last is no different than going first.
Yeah, it's
after the first.
Well, it also, I don't know, it just kind of like it adds some zing to it when the initiative changes every.
When one of the player characters has been poisoned and they die on 5, somebody has to go on somebody has to go on 6, 7, 8, 9 or whatever. You're desperate to make those initiative rolls. And it's not predictable. And my players love it. They take that initiative system, they go home, and they take it with them for their D&D 5e games because I show them how to make it work. Yeah, I've played around in 5e and other changing it every turn, but or every round or whatever. But and then another thing, another sales point is you might get to bash a Tolkien style orc in the head with your mace. So. The Kargir orcs have invaded Anher. You will guarantee have opportunities to bash a Tolkien-style orc. The only thing more satisfying than bashing an orc as a first or second level adventurer is clearing out the basement of rats in a computer role-playing game. So satisfying. All right. I got to wrap this up. Absolutely. Man, I really appreciate your time. Folks, again, go to ReaperMini.com and click on the RPG stuff. All the stuff's for free. All this, there's adventures, the rules. Download it, check it out, and there's more to come. This is just the beginning of a full role playing game experience from Reaper. So, any closing thoughts on that, there, Joseph? Other than basically DDRPGs for all of us. please grab it. Grab the adventures, and get back to me. Go to our forums. Go to our Discord server. Engage me. I would love to talk to you about it because, hey, like I said, this has not been written. This isn't just written for me. It's written for the fans, and I want everyone to enjoy it.
And you feel like that you've had pretty good reception from those that you've demoed it for?
The results have been at ReaperCon and also North Texas RPGCon. It has been overwhelmingly positive. People have enjoyed the heck out of it, and also the feedback, the critical feedback that has come forward has been very thought provoking, well presented, and it's definitely food for thought. So I'm not jettisoning all critical criticisms. Yeah. So I'm open to all of it because I want to.
Well, you're in beta mode. This is the time to.
Yeah, we're in beta. Yeah, there's warts. We're gonna fix them. Wait to see what we have planned for spring. It's going to be a very exciting time.
All right, cool. I have to do this to you. I call it the bad joke of the week. The show used to be weekly. Up until just a couple of years ago, this was a weekly FM radio talk show, and then it was podcast as well. Now we're podcast exclusive. So I'm not every week anymore, but I still call it the bad joke of the week because it just has a good ring to it. So here's the bad joke of the week, Joseph. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Cows go.
Cows go who?
No, silly. Cows go moo.
Oh, nice. It's a dad joke.
It's a total, yeah.
Gotta love those, man. Gotta love those.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. My son's favorite knock knock joke is knock knock.
Who's there?
Europe.
Europe who?
No, Europe who.
Oh, I gotta call poo. Awesome kid joke.
Yeah. So that's the patented bad joke of the week. And,
very nice.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah. Immensely.
Yeah. Immensely. All right, man. Well, Joseph, thanks so much for your time. Excited about what you're doing over there. Hopefully I'll get to see you soon at, maybe North Texas again. Maybe I can make it to ReaperCon.
To have you.
But yeah, I'm excited to see where you go with Dungeon Dwellers RPG, and I definitely hope people check it out. So thanks again. And everybody else, we will catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.